I know you guys wanted to talk football. I wanted to talk football. I'm in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. So I got to watch Kalen DeBoer address us today. And he's in the final throes of his first recruiting on the road period at Alabama. And all the coaches are out and about. You saw a lot of coaches at the Senior Bowl because they're stopping through. They're visiting recruits in the area. And so Kalen DeBoer, obviously Mobile, a very important area for him to recruit. And so he came in, but he also came in to see some of his former players, including Michael Penix Jr., the former Washington QB, who is playing in the Senior Bowl and lighting it up at the practice. He's looked really good. But DeBoer was asked about where Penix is at based on when he started with him at Indiana in 2019.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. Just kind of in 5 minutes, a snapshot of what he's gone through and what he's all worked for, and realizing that dream right now, and really in the best place he's ever been. When it comes to 2 to 3 years now, being healthy and just continue to develop and grow. Just all he's been through has prepared him mentally, for this type of scenario to where, the pressure is the pressure, but he knows and has the confidence that he's going to be just fine. He just does what he's capable of each and every day.
So DeBoer deserves a ton of credit for what he did with Penix, because this was a guy who was broken leaving Indiana. He'd had 3 consecutive season-ending injuries. It didn't feel like he was going to be able to ever recapture. You remember the 2020 game against Penn State. We reached for the pylon to win it in overtime. It didn't feel like he was going to be able to get back to that person. He not only got back to being that person, he excelled. I mean, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country, took his team to the national title game. And DeBoer and his staff, Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator especially, deserve a ton of credit for that. And that's what they're bringing to Alabama. Now, DeBoer got a question that I imagine he gets quite a bit on the road from recruits, parents, from high school coaches, that sort of thing. But he was asked basically, are you prepared for the difference in high school or in college football in the South versus the places you've coached before?
Coach, you see a difference between Pac-12 football and SEC football? Any noticeable difference?
I think there is. I mean, this level of football here in the SEC has been at a high championship level for a long time, and I think every part of the country has their own style. Physicality is what wins championships, and I think that's what that's what a lot of what we do is going to be based on. But I think football is also football, no matter where you go. And, our stuff will also translate to wherever we've been. And I've been in the Midwest and at other places in the country, and just making the jaunt from the West Coast to the Southeast. I think all the things we do will translate.
Kalen DeBoer ain't scared. I ain't scared. Listen, if you can win in one place, you can win in another place. It is not that much apples to oranges. Yes, the level of competition is higher in the SEC because the players are better. But the level of competition in the Big Ten is high, and he would have been in the Big Ten had he stayed at Washington. Jamie in the chat, I feel like DeBoer is viewed as some great hire because it's Alabama. Auburn, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Mississippi State make this hire, and it's not viewed the same. Well, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, or Mississippi State couldn't have made this hire because he would not have led Washington 4 days after playing the national title game. Because guess what? He was already in the national title game. So why would he go to one of those places when he was at a place where he can go to the national title game? He can go to Alabama because they go to the national title game a lot. So you can probably go to the national title game more at Alabama than you could at Washington. Those other places, basically the same or lesser. So why would you even consider that? It's a good hire because he's a good coach. He's won everywhere he's been. All right. Another question. This was a good one. DeBoer got asked about what he likes in an offensive line. And this is one of those that on its surface, you're like, okay, what does that mean? Everybody likes good blockers. But stylistically, what do you want? Size-wise, what do you want? Because what he had at Washington, very different than what Alabama had last year.
I think we just worked with what we had, and obviously it was a strong group. Both our right tackle and left tackle are going to be high-end draft picks, and Rodgers here at the Senior Bowl and doing a great job. So talent, was in a great spot there, and now it's just a matter of utilizing their strengths, and a lot of it revolved around what your quarterback can do. And with Michael, we were able to protect him, and then I think as the season went along, each and every year, 22 and 23, we developed a run game as the year went along, and that was important for us to win a conference championship. And the game, you always say you wear the pads for a reason, right? It's meant to be a physical game, and so the heart and soul of what we do, we'll have to rely on that.
So it's interesting when you compare and contrast Washington's offensive line this past year versus Alabama's. Washington, the tackles were 317 and 300 pounds. At Alabama, they were 354 and 335 pounds. Washington's guards, 327 and 275. Alabama's starting guards, 335 and 316. Center at Washington, 278. Center at Alabama, 301. Now, part of this is because Alabama can recruit elite athletes on the offensive line. So you can get bigger guys who are just as athletic as smaller guys. So part of it is they can have a heavier offensive line without sacrificing too much athleticism. Now, when you have guys who are 350, 340, you probably are sacrificing some athleticism versus a 315-pound offensive tackle. They're going to be the occasional freaks of nature who are much bigger and can move just as well. But that's pretty rare. So what happens next with this offensive line will be very interesting. Do they continue to be as big as they've been at Alabama, or do they streamline it a little more? If you watch the end of the Pac-12 championship game, Washington versus Oregon, and that's a really athletic Oregon defensive front. It's not a huge front. It's not necessarily as big as the bigger ones you'll see in the SEC, but it's certainly as athletic as some of the ones you'll see in the SEC. And they were wearing them down. It was a perfect 4-minute drill. And you saw the guards pulling and just crushing people on the edges. And that athleticism really showed. And this is the offensive line that won the Joe Moore Award as the best offensive line in the country. Clearly, that's something that works in that offense. So I would not be super shocked if Alabama's offensive linemen are a little bit lighter next year. If you see maybe instead of Caden Proctor's gone. He's the 354-pound tackle, and he is one of those athletic freaks of nature. He's gone to Iowa. But I wouldn't be stunned if Alabama's tackles next year are in the 325 to 330 range rather than the 335 to 350 range. I would imagine that they do get a little more streamlined, because if they're going to run the ball the way they did at Washington, some of those guys need to be able to move really well, especially given the athleticism of the fronts they'll face in the SEC. So I can't wait to see what happens here, because I think this is one of the more important strategic decisions that Kalen DeBoer and company will have to make. We'll do one more from DeBoer. This is a question about Austin Mack, who's one of the quarterbacks that they brought from Washington. He was on the roster at Washington last year as a freshman. He came to Alabama as a transfer, and not coincidentally, the morning after Austin Mack announced that he was committing to Alabama as a transfer, Julian Sayin, who was the number one quarterback recruit in the class of 2024, who had signed with Alabama, he entered the transfer portal, and he wound up at Ohio State. So here is Kalen DeBoer on Austin Mack.
Well, I think his skill set and all the tools he brings as a quarterback, the arm talent, but I also just think he's got a really great head on his shoulders. He's young, and for him to do what he did this last year with us, he reclassified and really learned the offense as fast as anyone I've ever seen at that age. And so, he's got to just continue to grow, continue to develop. And I know he's all about those challenges. He sees them as opportunities, and it was exciting for him as well as us to have him come down here.
So I think that's a pretty ringing endorsement of Austin Mack. Now, Jalen Milroe will probably go into spring practice as the starter, and if he performs well, I would imagine he comes out of spring practice as a starter and is the starter for Alabama this season. But it definitely feels like Mac is DeBoer's handpicked guy, kind of waiting in the wings. And I think that's why Julian Sayin made the decision he did. I think he saw the writing on the wall there. But very interesting comments from the new Alabama coach. Like, it's still wild to me. Kalen DeBoer replaced Nick Saban. Like, that happened. And somebody took a picture at Senior Bowl practice on Wednesday, and it was Jed Fish in his Washington gear looking at Kalen DeBoer in his Alabama gear. And the caption was essentially, show this to someone on January 1st of this year and ask them what happened. And their head would explode. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.